First, I want to thank everyone for joining us again. We know this time of year is full of deadlines and data reviews, submission prep. So we really do appreciate you guys taking the time and a break from your day-to-day to join us for the session. My name is Arielle Sutherland. I am the Director of Compliance Products here at RiskExec, and I'm joined by my colleague, Sarah Brons, who leads our CRA and 1071 small business lending products. A quick housekeeping note before we get started, we are recording today's session, and a copy of both the recording and our presentation will be emailed to you after. We'll also make this available on our website later this week. So if you do miss anything or if you want to share with a colleague, you'll have access to it. I also do want to take a moment here to set the stage for today's session. Now, this is the second part of our three-part series focused on HMDA and CRA submission preparation. In our first session, we focused a lot on what to fix before you file, more from that data perspective, really covering the issues that tend to surface late in the process and create that unnecessary friction during submission time here. During today's session, we really want to try and build off of that foundation we built last time and shifting our focus to look more towards that examination process. And the reason we're talking about this now is really important because it's at this point in the cycle where you still have time to review and adjust and align your data before it's locked in and before examiners start to look at that and form conclusions based on what you did ultimately submit. This session is really going to be focusing in on aligning your HMDA and CRA data in a way that supports a smoother, more defensible examination outcome so that when your examiners are starting to ask questions, you're prepared to answer them. And although HMDA and CRA data are submitted separately, during an exam, they are actually reviewed together. So examiners will use your HMDA trends to provide context for your CRA conclusions and CRA data to then validate your lending performance, geographic distributions, and your overall activity. Now, when those data sets do align, the exam process tends to run much more smoothly. When they don't, that's when we start to see these questions pop up from your examiners. So today we, again, are not going to be walking through requirements line by line. We're not going to be focusing on technical components here in isolation. Instead, we are going to be looking at the overall workflow, how your data is reviewed, compared, and used to draw those conclusions during the examination process. We want to keep this practical for you. And our conversation is really designed today to help you prepare while there's still time to make changes to the data so that you can have a story that you tell and can confidently rely on what was submitted. By the end of today's session, our goal is for you to really walk away with a clear understanding of what your examiners are going to be looking at once the data is in their hands, how alignment will reduce the follow-up questions that occur, or also talking through how alignment can speed up your exam responses. So once you're in that exam cycle, and why consistent data turns HMDA and CRA submissions into a defensible exam evidence. Now, we have saved some time today at the end of our session for Q&A. So please feel free throughout the session to submit your questions through the Q&A panel as we go along. If we don't get to all of the questions live today, we will review them and follow up with you accordingly. So with that context in mind, I'm going to turn things over to Sarah to start, who's going to walk us through how regulators actually use HMDA and CRA data during an exam and what that means for institutions preparing right now. Sarah?
Thanks, Arielle. Well, I think it's important here to just kind of ground in our exam process and what exactly is looked at during CRA exams. So to open this up a little bit, I think what we'll talk through first is just home mortgage lending and how that begins to pull into the exam. So When we think about HMDA and CRA data, even though the data sets are different, how the data points are collected are different, and even how some of those similar looking fields are arrived at differently, examiners are ultimately looking to draw their CRA exam conclusions from those data elements. So starting with HMDA, examiners are using HMDA data to evaluate your home mortgage lending performance. They're using it to evaluate both borrower distribution and the geographic distribution of lending. So to whom are you lending to and where are you lending are the important matters that they're looking at. With HMDA data, they're also going to look at the type of activity. So purchase loans, refinances, home improvement if you have it. One thing that's especially important here is to understand how your regulator is treating specific loan categories. We know we have 3 regulators who perform CRA evaluations, and they all approach their reporting. So that includes the design of performance evaluation tables a little bit differently. Some regulators aggregate all that home mortgage lending for a total amount. Others break it into distinct categories. The important part is that as an institution, you know how your regulator approaches this data, and that will tell you how they are going to evaluate your performance. One of the key takeaways here with HMDA data is it's not just about whether or not it's accurate, but that you understand how it's going to be presented and evaluated by your regulator. As we move on to CRA data, so again, the examiners are after understanding how and what your small business and small farm lending looks like. So they're going to use that CRA data to evaluate whether or not you're lending to businesses and farms with revenue of $1 million or less, and then of course where that lending is occurring at. When they look at HMDA and CRA data in the course of the exam, they're going to look at where that activity intersects. So examiners aren't just looking at the 2 data sets in isolation, they're looking for patterns. So do you have geographies where you're maybe active in home mortgage lending? Are you similarly active in small business lending in those areas? So some of this starts to inform the very early phases of the exam as to whether or not your assessment areas are even designated accurately. But the alignment of CRA and HMDA data can also start to explain where you might have gaps. So for instance, if you're in a geography where you have lower home mortgage lending volume, is that explainable because it's an area where you have higher small business lending because it's an area that's concentrated with businesses? Again, the goal from an examiner perspective isn't to trip you up in any way, but it's really to understand whether your data tells a coherent story about how and where your institution is lending. Another really important element to know and understand is that when examiners are looking at the HMDA and CRA data together, they are ultimately looking at volume to drive some weighting in the evaluation. So as an example, if your lending activity, and I mean that holistically, home mortgage, small business, small farm, if you are more of a small business or small farm lender, and that means that those conclusions related to small business or small farm are going to carry more weight in the exam. If home mortgage lending is a greater volume, similarly, that's what's going to drive the evaluation conclusions. You'll see this typically play out in the narrative of the performance evaluation, but it's always good to know what your volumes look like overall, because that's going to help you kind of understand how the exam is going to shake out for your conclusions. In the course of the exam, examiners might also look at prior evaluations to look at lending distributions. They might look at how those changed over the years of the evaluation period. But again, it's going to come down to weighting based on those 2 categories, and HMDA and CRA data are primarily what's going to drive those conclusions. Community development, of course, comes into those larger bank exams, but when it comes to the lending test, HMDA and CRA data is really key. The big takeaway here is that HMDA and CRA data are evaluated together. It's not independently. So they're looking at that data together, and alignment across those data sets helps examiners understand your performance quickly and reduces any follow-up questions that might be driven by confusion. So know what those distributions look like and what they're saying about your institution. In the next section, we'll talk about what happens when that alignment breaks down, and talk about some common misalignments that might trigger exam questions. So I think the big question here is what could go wrong? So In our experience, examiner questions are often not triggered by bad data. You have to think about the fact that by the time you've reached the CRA evaluation, examiners have concluded that your data is reliable and can be used for the exam. But what might spur questions are some alignment differences in maybe how the institution is looking at their data or how they've presented it versus how the exam is going to look at it. So one big element here is just knowing the differences between maybe how you are capturing for internal reporting your data and how that is affecting or different from the exam structure. We recognize institutions spend a lot of time building internal reports to support monitoring throughout the year. The challenge can be that those reports are not always structured in the same way the CRA performance evaluation is structured. We know examiner tables are organized very specifically, and of course the conclusions are based on those tables, but when internal reports are organized differently, whether it's different groupings, the data is rolled up differently, or even different emphasis, it can create some questions during the exam. My advice would be if your internal reports differ from examiner reports, know where they differ, know the implications, and know what you might want to be prepared to explain in the course of the exam. Of course, like we've said, at this point, it's not about accuracy. Your data is accurate, but the framing can raise questions during the exam. Another element to keep in mind is the structure of tables and validating volumes and amounts. So this can typically show up, or these kind of questions might show up when examiners present you with your tables and say, hey, take a look, we're going to draw our conclusions based on these tables. If your institution has taken a different approach, or even if lending categories maybe are rolled up differently than how you've approached it internally, this can raise some questions that as an institution, you'll want to make sure that you can quickly absorb and answer. So of course the exam can proceed, but also you can know how you're being evaluated. A third factor to keep in mind is just the data presentation consistency. So this is where this issue might come up is if maybe in your first year of your evaluation period, you distributed your data differently across certain reports, and then in the last couple of years, you made a change to your approach. If this is in any internal reporting that you're sharing with an examiner, or if you're sharing a self-assessment that has some differences, again, with how they're going to be looking at it, this can raise some questions. And you want to keep in mind that the examiners are going to use their tables. So you'll want to know what they're looking at and how a different presentation or approach that you've taken might affect any questions that might come up or what you're seeing from them. One key point to keep in mind is that exams often cover multiple years and they combine data. A lot of regulators combine data over multiple years. So you might see something that could be quite a bit different than what you've presented over the years. Again, another key takeaway here is that you will have a chance during the course of an exam to see the examiner tables that will be used in the course of the exam. So take that time. What I would encourage is once you are provided with those examiner tables, take time to look at them. You'll have probably a short window to review them. It's a highly valuable opportunity. It'll give you a chance to make sure that you have validated the amounts and volumes in those tables and that they make sense based on what you know about your data. Take advantage of that opportunity because it gives you a chance to look at your tables before conclusions are finalized based on those tables. So again, always an important element of the exam and something you want to do. Next, we'll talk about the best practices for ensuring consistency across your submissions. So at this point, I'll hand it off to Arielle to talk more about that approach.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing these insights. I definitely want to build off of some of the topics that you've discussed here today and shift the focus more into kind of the practical side here, what you should actually be doing now to ensure the consistency in your submissions while there's still time to do it. I mean, you've mentioned, once your data gets to the exam, the quality of the data has already been assessed. Right now is your time to assess the data. So when they come in to perform that portion of the exam, you can be prepared to react in a timely fashion. At the practical level, this consistency starts with applying that same approach the same way every single time you're looking at the data. This means having a methodology that's consistent year over year. We talk about exams covering a multi-year term. So you want to make sure that these are the areas that you have clearly defined if there are changes that don't align year over year. Some of the important areas to really focus in on, and we touched on these a little bit in part one, loan location methodology. So making sure from a CRA perspective that the address that you are using is consistent and you're mapping them and attributing those consistently across your geographies. And if you do make a change to your methodology or your approach, making sure that you are documenting that differences. Revenue identification for your small business, small farm lending. Even differences in how revenue thresholds are applied can change your loan counts and your loan distributions, which sometimes don't reconcile cleanly when you start to look at trends year over year. So making sure you have all of that consistently documented and standardized. Another piece on the HMDA side we talked a little bit about last time as well is your home purchase or your loan purpose classifications when we start to talk about refinances and can lead into home improvement loans as well. This is where operational workflows sometimes don't align cleanly with reporting definitions, and you'll want to make sure that you have that clearly outlined for your staff to follow when you start to look at data quality. We mentioned this last time, some of the areas that we talked about technically will pass your edits, but they're still going to likely raise questions if you haven't started by comparing the trends you see across your different data sets. The next best practice that I wanted to kind of review here is looking at your historical submissions side by side, because your examiners also perform that type of comparison, a year over year trend, changes across your full exam cycle, and how your HMDA and CRA activity move together or change over time. You'll want to perform those same comparisons early on in the process. And doing that now gives you an opportunity to spot those differences early before they turn into those exam questions. If something does look different, one of the things you'll want to make sure you're addressing is why things look different and determining whether or not it's, a real business change was made throughout that trend. Was there a shift in methodology? Or is there a classification issue that you need to address and make sure that you do have clearly documented? That naturally leads into also validating your volume and your geographic changes. Now, again, changes themselves aren't necessarily a problem. What matters is whether or not you can clearly identify what drove those changes. Was there a new lending product or program that you have offered that is reflective in that change? Did you enter or exit a new market or an existing market? And then another question too to look at, was there a shift in your mortgage lending or your small business, small farm lending? So did you make a strategic business move to exit a specific sector? And now it's changing what your performance looks like. Those changes should be visible and documented consistently across your HMDA and CRA data. If they aren't, that's going to be a signal to pause and take a closer look at why those differences have occurred, and likely do that look prior to submitting your data. And finally, before you do finalize, it's important to perform that sanity check, stepping back and asking kind of that larger, higher level questions. Do these trends make sense for what I've experienced throughout the last couple of years? Does your HMDA data tell the same story between when comparing that to your CRA lending? And would someone unfamiliar with the internal process be able to understand what they are seeing? Doing this work now is going to help you ensure that once your data is submitted, you understand it, and that any inconsistencies that pop up during the exam cycle isn't the first time that you were seeing them internally. All right. So once you've really put in the work in creating that consistency in your processes, standardizing your approaches, validating it against your history, and aligning it before submission, the natural question then becomes, what does that actually give you? What is the benefit here? In this next section, we're going to talk about what that payoff is. Now, because HMDA and CRA data are aligned, it doesn't just reduce questions at submission time. It's going to fundamentally strengthen your documentation, governance, and your overall exam experience. When we do align HMDA and CRA data, the biggest shift we see here is institutions moving from reacting to questions into explaining the decisions that were made during the exam time. And that starts with having consistent assumptions, consistent distributions, and a defensible story across your data sets. When you do have these three things line up, everything becomes much easier through that entire examination process. It starts with the documentation. I think that's been a common theme we've talked about. Sarah mentioned that. We talked about that a little bit on our previous slide. Instead of building the explanations on the fly, if you start to document all of your decisions throughout the process, you're already going to have an established workflow that represents what actually happened and why it happened. This dramatically reduces the need for those ad hoc narratives that are generated during the exam cycle. And instead of saying, let us look into this or let us investigate that a little bit more, your documentation already has that story told. And importantly, you're not going back and having to reevaluate the work that you had previously done to try and get to the answer. You already have the answer and can clearly present that to your examiners. Now, that naturally will lead into governance. Ownership and review points will become much clearer with that documentation in place. Teams will know who is responsible for the data, when is the data reviewed, and on what cadence, and how are those decisions being documented. Because if you create a process that is repeatable, meaning you're not reinventing it year over year, clear alignment will make sure that these key decisions and adjustments are supported throughout the entire workflow. This consistency is really what examiners are expecting from financial institutions when they start to assess controls and oversight. And then lastly, I did want to mention from an exam standpoint, you're going to see an immediate impact here if you are creating stronger documentation throughout the process and improving that overall governance. Aligned data is going to lead to faster, more confident responses. Teams aren't going to be scrambling last minute to try and gather the documentation and reconcile numbers or explain those discrepancies. Examiners, again, are not just going to be evaluating the data, they're going to be evaluating your confidence as well in that process. And alignment helps to demonstrate that confidence. Now, the last piece here I do want to mention before we jump into our Q&A is there's also a real internal benefit here when you take the time to prepare prior to submission, and that's ensuring that everyone throughout the organization understands what the data shows and why. Business units won't be surprised when they are in certain exam discussions or responding to examiner questions. And your compliance team can really stop focusing their time on reacting and spending more time on guiding others through this process. So with that, I do want to shift things to our Q&A. Sarah, did we get any questions in the Q&A section?
Yeah, Arielle, we did. So there's we had one in the chat, and I'll do my best to address that one, and then we can grab those from the Q&A. So Laura had kind of a specific question about that weighting that I mentioned In the CRA exam, how do regulators determine what weight to give borrower geographic distribution, weighting versus community development lending? So Laura, I'll speak from the experience we've seen here, and that is that typically the weighting and those volumes, both dollar and count, are really tied to home mortgage and small business lending. And that's really what is going to drive the bulk of the conclusions on the lending test for a large bank. When you get into community development, the volume you have there is looked at separately in the sense that it's not going into that same count. But it is something like community development lending is compared to tier one capital. And your percentages of tier one capital and how that's allocated are really what is kind of driving exam conclusions. So think of that community development lending volume as separately from those counts and volumes that you see for home mortgage and small business and small farm. The actual regulation itself talks through being a leader in community development lending, and then also in performance evaluations. Sometimes we see language like community development lending had a positive impact on the lending test, but it is separate. Those counts and the count and dollar amount does not make it into the distribution in the same way it does for home mortgage and small business and small farm.
Great, thanks, Sarah. It looks like we do have one other question that just popped into the Q&A. Can you speak to any reports in RiskExec that you would recommend for helping to align the CRA and HMDA data?
Yeah, I would. So first of all, I would always point to our examiner tables in RiskExec. We do have tables for each of the respective regulators that perform exams. So I always say for our clients, look at the one that aligns to the regulator that supervises your exams. Obviously, one of the quicker ones are things like lending activity and inside and outside. So this is allowing you to take a look at the volume. So again, getting to how much do I have of each kind and what could drive my conclusions. And then inside and outside is another good one just to understand if does how I've designated, for instance, my assessment areas make sense with my goals or targets for an inside and outside ratio. But if this is, Monty, if you have other questions for us, we're always happy to look at those or take a question through support on that as well.
Awesome. Great. Now, I think we have another minute. I did want to address something that I have seen come up quite a bit recently, not necessarily impacting the 2025 submission of HMDA data, but definitely an impact on your 2026 data, and that's around the changes made in the APOR tables. So one of the things that we have been hearing lately is asking for guidance on whether or not the CFPB has issued any official guidance or if they intend to issue guidance on how to treat those differences. And I did want to say we have recently heard some unofficial guidance from the CFPB, and the key takeaway right now is what we talked about, and that is documenting your decisions. So, whether or not you relied on the originally published source or the updated source for that APOR difference, they are emphasizing that right now, the thing that institutions should do and the takeaway here is to just clearly document when the transition between the tables occurred and which values you did rely on. There is no formal written guidance relating to this, and it's likely we won't receive any guidance on it, but just wanted to pass that along. Before we go ahead and wrap up for today, I did want to quickly highlight the part 3 for our submission season Simplified webinar series. Will occur on February 18th, and that is going to be a RiskExec only, client only session where we'll focus specifically on submitting data through RiskExec, including some best practices and common questions we see through this process. It's going to be constructed as a guided learning lab series with a built-in Q&A. We'll have a whole 30 minutes of unrecorded, unfiltered time with Sarah and I, so please come prepared with all those questions. I also did want to remind you that registration is now open for the 2026 Forum, a surety event proudly sponsored by RiskExec. This year it is taking place in New Orleans, April 20th through 22nd. Now, if you do have any questions or want to dive deeper in any of the topics we've discussed here today, you can certainly email me directly at asutherland@riskexec.com or contact us at info@riskexec.com. Lastly, to stay up to date on the latest and greatest insights, webinars, and company news, I encourage you all to follow us on LinkedIn if you don't already. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for all of the attendees here today. I'm so glad that you were able to join us, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.